Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, so today we're taking all those insights you shared, about international customs, how people communicate differently, those classic etiquette mistakes, and we're turning it into something really practical, like instant intelligence you can actually use. Think of it as a shortcut to feeling more confident out there in the world.
Exactly, because whether you're traveling, maybe working across borders, or even just, trying to understand global news or media, knowing these cultural specifics, it's fundamental.
Yeah.
Our goal here really is to go beyond just saying, oh, be respectful. That's too vague. We want to dive into the specific ways different societies are structured, what they value. That's how you genuinely broaden your horizons.
And it's just so easy to mess up, isn't it? I mean, my own facepalm moment, which actually came up in the sources as a classic blunder.
Oh, yeah?
Trying to order a cappuccino in Italy after 11 a.m.
Oof. Yeah, that's a big one.
The look I got from the barista, it said everything. It wasn't just a coffee. It was a breakfast drink tied to digestion and timing. I'd broken this core unspoken Italian rule. It was mortifying.
But see, those little rules, they often point to much bigger cultural values. And simple things like gestures, they carry serious weight. That OK sign, making a circle with your thumb and index finger.
Seems harmless here.
Right, but in parts of South America, bits of Europe, it's really offensive. It just perfectly shows how even our basic movements are completely tied to culture.
Okay, so let's dig into that idea, the real value of cultural immersion. It's clearly about more than just, hitting the tourist spots.
Oh, absolutely. It's transformative. The sources we looked at consistently hit this point.
Yeah.
Deep exploration builds empathy. It forces you to actually question your own assumptions.
Right.
And it leads to pretty dramatic personal growth. You start to see that your way of doing things, it isn't the default. It's just one way.
And the example that came up was teaching English in South Korea. That kind of total immersion sounds intense. They mention hitting culture shock pretty hard.
Definitely. And what they learned super quickly wasn't just vocabulary. It was realizing the massive gap between, say, textbook Korean and how the culture actually operates day to day.
What was the biggest thing?
I think the most powerful insight was grasping the deep importance of hierarchy and respect for elders in Korean society. It's baked into everything.
How so?
How you stand, how you pour a drink for someone who speaks first. It's this constant, palpable force. It's way more pronounced than in most Western cultures. And you really only get that feel through living it, observing it daily.
Okay, but most of us can't just pack up and move overseas.
Yeah.
So how can you or I start exploring this stuff right now?
Well, you can literally start at your dinner table. Food tells a story, right? When you try new cuisines, you're tapping into the history, the rituals behind them.
Like the Japanese tea ceremony example.
Exactly. It's not just about drinking tea. It's a very specific, codified ritual. It's about appreciating the moment, the host, the connection. That focus tells you so much about the culture's values right there.
And then there's media, language.
Right. Foreign films, books, music, they give you a window into different ways of thinking, different internal worlds, and language learning. Even just basics like, hello, thank you.
Shows effort.
Huge effort. It shows immediate respect. It's probably the most direct path to understanding because you're engaging on their terms.
Okay, which I guess leads us right into the trickiest part.
Yeah.
Communication itself. Time, words, silence. This is where the big misunderstandings happen, right?
Absolutely. This is a minefield. And maybe the biggest one is how different cultures perceive time itself.
Let's break that down. The sources talked about two main systems. First, the punctual ones, monochronic cultures.
Right. Think Germany, Switzerland, the US, UK, places where time is seen almost like a commodity. You manage it, you save it, you spend it. An 8 a.m. meeting means 8 a.m. sharp.
Because being on time is about respecting the other person's schedule.
Exactly. Punctuality equals respect. But then you have polychronic cultures.
Where is that more common?
Often Latin America, the Middle East, parts of Africa, Southern Europe. Here, time is much more fluid. Relationships, family priorities, those often trump a rigid schedule.
Like the Argentina example. Arriving fashionably late.
Yeah, 15, maybe 30 minutes late for a social thing is often totally normal, sometimes even expected. Showing up exactly on time can actually feel a bit awkward. Too eager, maybe.
Wow. Okay, that feels like a fundamental clash. So if you're, say, a German business person, very monochronic, dealing with a partner in Argentina, polychronic, how do you even bridge that?
It takes a real mental shift. You have to understand that in many relationship-focused cultures, building trust is the main goal initially. The schedule might be secondary.
So if a deadline slips because of a family issue,
The relationship has to come first, because a strong relationship is seen as the key to long-term collaboration. You have to learn to see that flexibility not as like inefficiency, but as a commitment to the person. It's just a different operating system.
a different operating system. I like that. Okay, let's shift from time to words. And maybe even more importantly, what's not said.
Yeah, the verbal and nonverbal stuff. There's a big split here, too. You have cultures that value very direct communication, say what you mean what you say. Germany, the Netherlands are often cited.
Get straight to the point.
Right. And then you have cultures, particularly many in Asia, that prefer much more indirect approaches. Saying no directly can be seen as impolite, even aggressive.
So they might.
Yeah.
But beat around the bush.
Kind of, or they offer alternatives, use vaguer language. The goal is often to maintain harmony, avoid causing offense. You have to learn to read between the lines.
Which connects straight to that concept of saving face, right?
Yeah.
That seemed crucial. Can you explain that a bit more? Like, how could missing that wreck a business deal?
Saving face is huge, and it's complex. It's basically about maintaining dignity and avoiding embarrassment, not just for yourself, but really importantly for the other person.
Okay.
So imagine you criticize a manager publicly in front of their whole team. Even if you're factually correct, you've caused them to lose face. The sources are clear. That can completely destroy the relationship. Irreparably.
So any negative feedback, even constructive stuff, has to be private.
Absolutely. Always private. It allows the person to address the issue without public humiliation to maintain their dignity. It's a massive difference from, say, some Western management styles that really prize transparency and direct feedback, sometimes very publicly.
Okay. That indirect style is basically a tool for saving face.
Got it. What about other nonverbals, body language?
Yeah, we mentioned the okay sign, but other things too. Prolonged eye contact. In some parts of Asia, Africa, it can feel aggressive or disrespectful.
And pointing?
Big no-no, generally. Whether it's with your finger or even pointing with chopsticks at someone during a meal, usually considered very rude. You also mentioned silence. Here, silence in a conversation often feels awkward, like you need to fill it.
Exactly. We tend to interpret it as disagreement or discomfort, but in many cultures, maybe influenced by Buddhism or even informal European negotiations, silence can mean something totally different.
Like what?
Respect. Contemplation. It might just mean I'm listening carefully and thinking about what you said. Learning to just be okay with that stillness, not rush to fill it. That's a really important skill.
Let's pivot to some more of those specific etiquette fails. We had my cappuccino disaster, but dining rules seem especially tricky.
Oh, definitely. The clean plate mistake in China is such a perfect example. It flips our usual thinking.
How so?
Well, in many Western cultures, cleaning your plate shows you enjoyed the meal right, compliments the host. In China, traditionally, if you eat absolutely everything, it implies the host didn't provide enough food.
Oh, wow. Like you're still hungry?
Exactly, which implies they weren't generous enough, potentially causing them to lose face. Leaving a little bit actually shows you were well-fed and satisfied, honoring their generosity. It's the total opposite.
That's wild. Okay. Another danger zone seemed to be gift giving. Sounds like you really need to do your homework there.
Seriously, gift giving is a really important part of building and maintaining relationships in many cultures, especially somewhere like Japan, with the whole homage custom bringing back souvenirs from trips is a huge expectation.
But it's riddled with potential mistakes. Taboos.
Yes, lots of symbolism, like never give a set of 4 of anything.
Why 4?
Because the word for 4 in Chinese, Japanese, Korean sounds very similar to the word for death. So bad luck.
Okay, good to know. What else?
Clocks can be tricky in some Asian cultures, symbolizes time running out. Sharp objects like knives or scissors symbolize cutting off the relationship. These aren't just small slip-ups. They can send a really negative message.
And it's not just what you give, but how you give it.
Right. Protocol matters. In formal settings, like with a business card or a gift in Japan, you generally present it with both hands. Shows respect.
And opening it.
Depends on the culture. In some places, opening it right there in front of the giver is considered rude, maybe even greedy, like you care more about the object than the relationship. When in doubt, small, thoughtful gifts representing your own culture or good quality food or drink are usually safer bets.
Okay, so we've mapped out a lot of the pitfalls. But the sources also offered a path forward. Mistakes seem kind of inevitable, right? So how do we prepare, but also handle it when we do inevitably mess up.
Preparation is key, and it's really about showing genuine effort. The sources all stress doing your research, read, watch films, talk to people who've been there, and learn those basic phrases. Hello, thank you, excuse me.
Even just a little bit goes a long way.
A huge way. It immediately signals respect and commitment. But yeah, prep only gets you so far. Even seasoned travelers make mistakes. I mean, you mentioned queuing assumptions in Italy. We've all been there.
So recovery is everything.
Totally. How you handle the mistake is what matters. Apologize sincerely, show you want to learn, and honestly, sometimes a bit of humility and good humor about it goes a long way. People are usually forgiving if they see you're genuinely trying.
Okay, one last area. Culture isn't static, right? Especially now. The sources brought up these concepts of cultural hybridity and, importantly, cultural appropriation. We should touch on those.
Yeah, that's crucial. Cultural hybridity is pretty straightforward. It's that natural blending you see everywhere. Fusion food, global music trends, cultures influencing each other.
But cultural appropriation is more complex, more fraught.
It is, and the sources emphasized it's not just about borrowing something, a style, a symbol, it's about the power dynamics involved.
And the history behind it.
Exactly. It means being mindful not to trivialize or exploit elements from cultures that have been marginalized. It's about giving credit, understanding the original meaning and significance. Are you using it respectfully or just treating it like a costume or a fleeting trend? It requires more thought.
So whether it's time perception, saving face, avoiding give gaffes, or navigating these modern dynamics, it really all comes back to that core advice, doesn't it?
It does. Be curious. Be open-minded. Try to make genuine connections with people because those interactions, that's what really breaks down your assumptions and challenges stereotypes.
Okay, so just to recap this deep dive, we've looked at those fundamental differences in how cultures see time, monochronic versus polychronic. We've unpacked why saving face is so critical in communication.
And we've explored the logic behind some of those surprising etiquette rules around dining and gift-giving, showing it's not random, it's tied to values.
And I think if there's one big takeaway from everything we discussed, it's that realization. When you really engage with other perspectives, you see that the way you've always done things, it's not the only way.
And maybe not even the best way in every context. That realization, that's the real payoff. You know, the sources mention how in those relationship-focused cultures, that small talk up front isn't just filler, it's essential. It's building the trust before you get down to business.
It's the journey, not just the destination.
Exactly. So here's a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on this week. When you're approaching something new, maybe a relationship, a project, a goal, are you focusing only on the schedule, the endpoint? Or are you also prioritizing the rapport, the connection building, that journey that actually leads to stronger, more trusting partnerships? Something to think about.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. You're here because you want to get a quick but really solid, usable handle on, well, navigating different global cultures. It's complex stuff.
It really is.
Whether you're, scaling a business internationally or maybe just planning a trip, understanding that cultural landscape, it really determines your success.
Exactly. And our mission today, it's really about moving beyond just like simple etiquette tips. We've got a great stack of sources, personal travel stories, some foundational theories on time and respect, and some very practical guides for global work.
Yeah, we're aiming to synthesize all this into, let's say, intellectual tools for you. The goal isn't just listing differences. It's about understanding the underlying behavioral software, the thing that drives those differences.
Right. Why is cultural understanding so essential? It's because it helps you shift from just reacting to misunderstandings to actually predicting and maybe even preventing them.
It's about having those mental models ready.
Exactly. So you can quickly identify what's going on, whether it's communication styles or, different workplace priorities.
Okay, let's unpack this. We probably need to start where most people begin, that personal plunge.
Yeah.
The sharp reality of culture shock.
Yeah.
One source shared this really vivid story about spending a year teaching English in South Korea.
Oh, yeah, that was a great example. It really illustrates the gap between sort of academic prep and the lived reality, doesn't it?
Total.
They said the experience was incredible, but that initial phase, a real culture shock, as they put it. And it wasn't just the food or the weather.
Yeah.
It was the total sensory and social kind of reset.
Yeah.
The sheer amount of new information language, how you interact with strangers, everything. It can be, well, overwhelming.
And often, I think the biggest hurdle is language, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can study Korean grammar or maybe Spanish for ages.
Right.
But then what happens when you actually, hit the street?
That's when you bump up against the limits of textbook learning. The sources really nailed that difference. Your academic language skills, they help, sure, but they're almost useless if you don't get the cultural context that the language operates in. You might know Spanish verb conjugations, but that won't tell you the local slang.
Or the jokes.
Or how to say no politely in a business meeting without causing offense. It's all those nuances.
It's like knowing the dictionary definition versus understanding the social weight of a word.
Yeah.
So what's the one big thing immersion teaches you that, a book just can't?
Well, for that person in South Korea, it was the deeply ingrained importance of respect. Respect for elders, for hierarchy.
Right.
This system, it's heavily influenced by Confucian values, and it really is the social fabric. You can read about it, sure.
But you don't feel it.
Exactly. You don't grasp it until you see how even simple daily things, how you hand something to someone, where you sit, how you speak to an older person, it's all guided by this really clear social order.
But doesn't operating inside that kind of structure, at least at first, feel, restricted?
Yeah.
Especially if you're coming from a more individualistic place.
Oh, absolutely. And that's kind of the point, that shock, that friction. It forces you to look at your own culture's hidden assumptions.
Like assuming everyone should be addressed the same way.
Precisely. The assumption that equality of address is the default. You suddenly realize that what you thought was just normal is actually your cultural operating system. And getting that difference is so crucial because those same hierarchy rules, they pop up again in the global workplace.
Okay, before we get into the workplace, let's stick with those personal friction points for a minute. Specifically, the unspoken rules, the things that cause simple, avoidable mix-ups, like time, how we think about time.
Time is a fantastic example because it's treated so differently across cultures. This is where we can bring in the idea of monochronic versus polychronic time.
Okay.
So monochronic or M-time cultures, think Germany, Switzerland, maybe parts of the US, they see time as linear. It's scheduled. Punctuality is huge.
Yeah. So being late is more than just late. It's offensive.
It's offensive. You've wasted someone's valuable scheduled time. Then you have polychronic or P-time cultures.
And that's different how?
In many Latin American, Middle Eastern, African countries, the priority often shifts towards relationships and handling multiple things at once, rather than sticking rigidly to a schedule.
So being a little late might be okay.
It's often acceptable, yeah. Because the relationship, the conversation you're in right now, that takes precedence over the clock. Cutting short a good conversation just to rush off, that could be seen as rude.
That's a really useful distinction.
Yeah.
Schedule versus relationship. Without that framework, you just think the other person's being rude or disorganized.
Exactly. But with the framework, you start to understand the intent behind the behavior, not just the action itself.
And that need for respect, it goes beyond time into like physical etiquette too, right?
Yeah.
The sources stressed researching small actions before you travel.
Absolutely key. Like the classic example you mentioned, pointing chopsticks at someone in some Asian cultures. Big no-no.
Right. Or the Japanese tea ceremony. It's not just about drinking tea quickly.
Not at all. It's this detailed, almost silent ritual. It's designed to make you slow down, appreciate the moment, the detail. It's a whole different mindset.
And every culture has these kinds of signals, these codes.
They do. And making the effort, even if you stumble a bit, to follow local customs, that signals sincere appreciation. It shows respect. And that effort, that's like the basic currency for building trust. Doesn't matter if you're in a cafe or a boardroom.
That makes sense.
What's fascinating here is even if you can't physically travel, you can start building this kind of cultural fluency through language. Learning a language really does open a window into the internal logic of a culture.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's scale this up. How do these ideas, hierarchy, time, play out in the global workplace? How can they potentially derail international projects?
Right, this is where we can bring in another useful concept. Power distance. It basically measures how much people in a culture accept that power is distributed unequally.
Okay, so high power distance means...
High power distance cultures, Japan, India, often come up as examples. They put a strong emphasis on formal titles, respecting authority figures, and really sticking to the chain of command.
So communication flows very vertically, up and down the ladder.
Pretty much, yeah. Now, contrast that with lower power distance cultures, the US, Australia, Scandinavia, maybe, where workplaces tend to be more egalitarian.
More flat.
More flat, yeah. Horizontal communication is encouraged. Even junior team members are often expected to speak up, share ideas directly. And the sources had this perfect little story about an international team. An employee suggested a change in a meeting, but they hadn't consulted the senior members first through the proper channel.
Oh, I can see where this is going. That probably didn't land well.
It really didn't. The employee intended to show initiative, be proactive, but the behavior was seen as disrespectful because it violated that unwritten power distance protocol. They didn't read the room, essentially, didn't understand who needed to be looped in beforehand.
That's a classic costly mistake. And it links directly to ideas about work-life balance, too, which also vary wildly. Why is leaving at 5 p.m. sacred in Scandinavia, but in, say, South Korea or parts of the U.S., working late is almost like a badge of honor?
Yeah, it often comes down to how a culture defines dedication and whether the focus is more on the group or the individual.
Okay.
In that Scandinavian model, efficiency and personal well-being are highly valued. Leaving at 5 means you managed your time well. Good job.
Right.
In other, maybe higher pressure cultures, being visible, putting in the extra hours, that's often seen as a sign of commitment to the company, to the team. It's all about perception, really.
And this explains differences in just basic communication, too, like email etiquette. That can be surprisingly tricky.
Oh, definitely. And here we can use a final model, high context versus low context communication. It's super helpful.
Explain that. Low context is?
Low context communicators, you often find them in Germany, Northern Europe, the US. To some extent, they value directness, clarity, efficiency. The message is explicit. Emails are often direct and to the point. Facts, not fluff.
So if I start my email to a German colleague with, "Hope you had a great weekend," I might actually be slightly annoying them.
You might be, yeah. They want to get straight to the business. The message is the context. Now, high context communicators think places like Brazil, Mexico, much of Asia. They rely much more on implicit messages, shared understanding, nonverbal cues, the relationship.
So skipping the small talk is the mistake there.
Exactly. If you don't build that personal warmth first, ask about the family, make a connection, you can come across as cold, maybe even untrustworthy.
You need a rapport before the business. That need for rapport is the context. That's a huge difference. Getting that wrong could cause major professional headaches.
It absolutely can. And notice how it links back. High context cultures often lean toward polychronic time too. Why? Because building and maintaining that relationship is the priority. Schedules can bend for that.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's shift focus a bit to just daily life, personal interactions, community stuff. Let's talk about something as basic as personal space.
Oh, the contrast can be really striking, can't it? You have expressive Mediterranean cultures, Greece, Italy are good examples. People tend to stand closer.
Louder voices, maybe? More gestures?
Louder voices, more gestures, definitely more physical contact. Hugging, kissing on the cheeks when meeting, that's common. It signifies warmth, connection, trust.
But for someone from a more reserved, low-contact culture like the UK or Japan, maybe that closeness can feel, well, intense, overwhelming even.
It can create instant anxiety, yeah. But the point the sources make is once you understand that proximity is often a sign of acceptance, of being welcomed in, the initial discomfort can start to fade. You learn to read the gesture differently, as endearing, maybe not intrusive.
What about humor? That's another minefield.
Yeah.
We mentioned the German waiter taking a sarcastic joke, literally. That seems like a perfect low-context directness thing colliding with indirect humor.
Exactly. Humor, especially irony and sarcasm, relies so heavily on shared, unspoken context. If you're in a culture where the default expectation is directness, they just won't do the mental backflips needed to decode your sarcasm.
You just hear the words you said.
They take your words at face value. So the advice usually is stick to more straightforward, observational humor when you're crossing cultures. It's generally the safer bet for building bridges.
Okay, this feels like it leads naturally into perhaps the deepest contrast in values.
Yeah.
Collectivism versus individualism.
Ah, yes, this is really fundamental. Collectivist cultures, you see strong elements in the Middle East, Africa, parts of Asia. They center everything on the group.
The family, the community.
The extended family, the community, sometimes the tribe or company, group harmony, loyalty. Those are often the absolute highest values.
So how does that actually play out in behavior, especially if there's like a disagreement?
Well, a high priority is placed on avoiding public conflict. You might use indirect communication, maybe involve a third party, all to help everyone save face. Decisions are often made by consensus, involving that wider circle.
And the flip side, individualistic societies, Western ones mostly.
You're right. Places like the U.S., much of Western Europe, Here, the emphasis shifts. Personal choice often reigns supreme. The rights, the expression, the achievements of the individual are paramount.
So conflict isn't necessarily seen as bad.
Not always, no. It can be seen as a necessary way to get to the truth or find the best solution. People often feel more empowered to challenge things, to rock the boat for self-expression or optimization. It's a profound difference.
And it shapes everything.
Everything. From how holidays are celebrated, think big, explosive, community-focused festivals like Diwali in India or Carnival in Brazil.
Compared to
maybe quieter, more intimate, family-focused holidays like Thanksgiving in the U.S. Very different feel, different focus.
So as we kind of synthesize the key lessons from this deep dive, it feels like the big theme isn't just people are different. It's more that you have to assume their intent might be coded differently from yours.
That's a great way to put it.
And those personal connections we talked about, they're invaluable precisely because they force you to challenge those codes, those assumptions.
Exactly. You might arrive somewhere with preconceived notions, stereotypes even.
We all do.
We all do. But actually sitting down with someone local, hearing their reality, it just chips away at those assumptions. It forces empathy. That real-world contact is, I think, the essential ingredient. You can't just read about it.
Right. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, what's the practical advice? What should you, the listener, carry forward for handling those inevitable cross-cultural bumps in the road?
Well, patience and empathy are the baseline, obviously, but practically, learn to listen for the signals. Is someone uncomfortable, confused, and be willing to admit quickly if you think you've caused offense, even unintentionally.
Just own it.
Own it. Apologize quickly, ask clarifying questions. Did I misunderstand something, or help me understand? And don't underestimate shared humor when it feels right. It can genuinely diffuse tension and rebuild those bridges when things get awkward.
Okay, so if we had to boil it down to one single piece of strategic advice, the number one takeaway for navigating this global landscape, what would it be?
I'd say, be relentlessly curious and stay open-minded. You absolutely have to approach new experiences with a sense of wonder and just be willing to step outside your comfort zone. Way outside sometimes.
See, confusion is learning.
Yes. If you can view every moment of confusion or awkwardness not as a frustration, but as a genuine learning opportunity, you're already halfway there. You're succeeding.
That's powerful advice.
Yeah.
Okay, and here's a final provocative thought for you to chew on as we wrap up. We have all this technology now, right? Social media, amazing translation apps. They let us peek into lives worldwide, bridge huge distances from our sofas. But what crucial elements of cultural understanding, that feel of power distance you mentioned, the actual tension between high and low context communication, what can only be truly grasped through real-world immersion, through direct personal challenge?
Yeah. What depth are we potentially missing when we rely only on that digital lens?
Something to think about, definitely.
Something worth mulling over before your next international meeting or maybe just your next holiday.
Absolutely. Well, that was our deep dive into navigating global cultures. We aim to give you the frameworks to not just travel or work internationally, but to truly connect. We hope you feel thoroughly informed. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something huge, the cultural shifts driven by globalization and, well, the tech that makes it all happen. We've gone through all the sources you sent over, the articles, research, your notes, and we're trying to really unpack how digital connection has, fundamentally changed traditions, daily life, even how we think about culture itself. It's kind of made the world feel smaller, but maybe more complicated too.
That complexity is exactly the point, I think. The core idea from the material is pretty clear. Globalization hasn't just shrunk distances, it's added layers. We get that instant connection, sure, but figuring out the ethics, understanding the real weight of it all, that's the new challenge.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start with the engine, right? Technology, It's not just how we talk, it's like this global melting pot almost. You see platforms like Instagram, TikTok, they take something super traditional and suddenly it's viral.
Yeah.
Traditions almost have to adapt as they travel now. And that example you pulled out was fascinating. The video blending traditional Indian dance with U.S. hip-hop moves seamlessly. Like 20 years ago, coordinating that would have been a massive international effort.
Exactly.
Now it just happens spontaneously. Millions see it before the dancers even, pack up.
And that speed, that sheer volume, that's what the sources are calling cultural export on steroids. K-pop is really the textbook example here. It's not just catchy tunes, right?
Right.
It's a masterclass in using YouTube, streaming, building this whole global following. Fans aren't just listening.
No, they're all in.
Totally. They adopt the look, the fashion, they're learning Korean phrases. It's this complete cultural package delivered directly, bypassing all the old media gatekeepers. Just pure digital reach and smart marketing. It's incredibly powerful, that connection. But as the sources immediately point out, it's definitely a double-edged sword.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We have to weigh the good against the real risks. The upside is obvious. Way more global awareness. You can virtually experience Chinese New Year or watch a festival happening halfway across the world. It builds empathy, bridges those gaps.
Yeah, you feel more connected.
But the downside, it's this risk of severe dilution. Simplification. When traditions get shared at lightning speed just for clicks, for likes, the history, the context, the sacredness, it often gets stripped away, boiled down to something easily digestible, maybe even commercial.
And that leads right into a major concern from the research, especially around sensitive stuff. Indigenous communities, for example, who fought for ages to protect their practices.
Yeah.
They're genuinely worried.
Understandably so.
Worried that sacred ceremonies, these deeply meaningful rituals, are getting exposed and, frankly, trivialized without anyone meaning to. It's jarring. Imagine something profoundly sacred, rooted in a specific place, and people suddenly becoming misunderstood, maybe mocked, as a TikTok challenge.
Yeah.
The speed just doesn't allow for the necessary context, the complexity. It's almost impossible to police once it's out there like that.
So what's the takeaway then?
Well, it's more than just be respectful. That's kind of vague. It's really about understanding that when culture goes digital, the sharer has a much bigger responsibility. You have to credit the source, provide accurate context, and know where appreciation stops and exploitation or just making light of it begins. That awareness, that's the firewall against appropriation.
That's a really important distinction.
Okay.
Let's pivot a bit from the sort of intangible rituals, media, to the really tangible impacts. Globalization in our daily lives, specifically food, fusion cuisine.
Ah, yeah.
It's everywhere. And it's delicious proof of cultures colliding, adapting. The sources mention sushi burritos in LA, Japanese meets Tex-Mex, sort of. Or kimchi tacos popping up in Mexico, cultures borrowing, mixing, making something new.
And sometimes it creates these wonderful, unexpected things, like that example of curry pizza being huge in London. It sounds maybe a bit weird initially.
A little bit.
But it shows how immigrant communities adapt their home cooking, using what's available locally, the local tastes, and end up creating something totally new, totally localized in its own right.
That mixing is exciting. But the movement of people, especially tourists in huge numbers, that has a serious flip side. The research calls it over-tourism.
Yeah, that's a critical point in the sources. It's a real tension. You look at places like Venice or parts of Bali. The sheer number of tourists, thanks to easy, cheap global travel, it puts this huge strain on everything. Infrastructure, housing costs for locals. It literally changes the feel of the place, erodes the quality of life.
So what's the guidance for us, for the listener?
Well, the studies are basically saying responsible travel isn't optional anymore, it's mandatory. Support local businesses, not just the big chains. Respect capacity limits. Think about Machu Picchu needing to restrict numbers. And try to minimize your footprint. Don't just treat a place like a backdrop for your photos, Engage with it thoughtfully.
Okay, good advice. Switching back to tech for a second, communication. AI, translation apps. They're absolute game changers, aren't they?
Oh, definitely.
Google Translate, Deep, Kenes. You get this instant connection. I love that anecdote in the notes about using an app in a little shop in Japan.
Yeah.
Actually chatting with the owner, laughing together over the funny mistranslations. Those little moments, they bridge gaps.
That immediate connection is revolutionary for, say, simple transactions or basic introductions, no doubt. But we got to remember the limits.
Okay.
Technology is great with words, with vocabulary, but culture, that's built on nuance. These apps often miss the crucial stuff. Idioms, tone changes that mean respect or sarcasm, cultural references that just don't translate directly. It connects the words, sure, but it doesn't automatically grant that deep understanding you get from real fluency.
And while we're talking digital access, virtual reality gets a mention too. It's pretty amazing for accessibility, right? Touring the Louvre, wandering the Great Wall, all from your sofa. The sources say VR lets people engage with culture who might not be able to physically or financially, but they also make the point, and I think it's fair, that nothing quite beats the real thing. The dust, the sounds, the smells, it's whole sensory overload.
Yeah, the visceral experience. Okay, moving into the more societal stuff. How does all this global media exposure shape how we see each other? Stereotypes, for instance.
Right.
Globalization, with its constant stream of movies, TV, news, it can definitely reinforce those broad stroke stereotypes.
How so?
Well, if audiences mostly see Italians portrayed as, super passionate all the time, or Germans as incredibly precise and rigid, and those cliches stick, the sheer volume of media can just solidify these simplified national identities.
Yeah, I think we've all absorbed those shortcuts sometimes. But the antidote, which the research points to, is personal experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
Actually traveling, meeting people, or even just engaging with the diverse personal stories.
Yeah.
That's what breaks the mold.
Exactly.
I mean, I've met some really quiet, reserved Americans, definitely defying the loud tourist thing,
Yeah.
and some wonderfully disorganized Germans, too.
That clash with expectations, that's where real understanding starts. The solution suggested: actively promoting diverse creators in media, highlighting individual, nuanced stories, and crucially, updating school curricula, teaching global history early, focusing on complexity, not just simple national stories. Build that empathy young.
We also see this complexity with migration, people moving for work, for safety. They create these incredibly vibrant multicultural hubs. Think of cities like Toronto or Dubai. They're richer, more dynamic because of that diversity. And you see it on the ground level, which is lovely. Neighborhoods transformed by festivals like Diwali or Eid or Lunar New Year, traditions becoming part of the local fabric.
It creates so much richness, absolutely. But also, let's be honest, social tension. The sources warn that just having diverse people isn't enough. Integration needs active support.
Wow.
Things like accessible language classes, community events designed to bring different groups together, policies that actually prevent isolation or ghettos forming. It needs deliberate effort.
So looking ahead, if tech keeps accelerating all this, where's it going? The materials had some interesting ideas, maybe more focus on collaboration around shared challenges, climate change, health crises.
Yeah.
We might see more global art projects about sustainability, for example.
Or shared digital stories about resilience. And we're already seeing that post-pandemic shift towards hybrid events, right? Mixing global perspectives virtually, exchanging ideas without everyone needing to fly thousands of miles, cuts down on emissions too.
That makes sense.
But, and this is a really important counterpoint in the sources, we can't let the shiny new future distract us from preserving the past. We have to keep pushing for documenting and saving endangered languages, traditions. That's the vital work groups like UNESCO do with intangible heritage. The stories, the skills, the knowledge. It can vanish so quickly if we're not careful.
So, wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway for you listening? Essentially, you're not just a citizen of one place anymore. You're a global citizen. And that requires being thoughtful. Use tech to connect, yes, but learn deeply. Travel, but do it responsibly. And maybe most importantly, use all this exposure to challenge the stereotypes media throws at you, old and new.
Which brings us to that final thought to leave you with, something to mull over. If technology like advanced AI, real-time translation, if it keeps improving and basically dissolves the immediate language barrier so we can all instantly, perfectly understand each other's words, what then? What becomes the new fundamental boundary? What will define cultural difference in the future, if not language?
Something to think about. Keep exploring, keep thinking globally. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Okay, let's forget the standard checklist itinerary for a minute, chasing those passport stamps. Today we're really digging into what's behind truly transformative travel. Cultural immersion. We've gathered quite a bit of research, firsthand accounts, stories that treat travel not just as like a leisure thing, but as a real pathway to becoming a better global citizen. So our mission here is to give you a kind of blueprint for going, well, soul deep into another culture. We're trying to distill the most powerful anecdotes, the really practical tips, and crucially, the ethical stuff, how to make sure you come back fundamentally changed.
Yeah, and I think it's important to set the stakes right away. We're talking about more than just, a nice holiday. What the sources suggest is that real immersion, it often involves that uncomfortable feeling, that realization that maybe your normal life is missing something fundamental. That's kind of the fuel for transformation, right? It's about stepping into a completely different reality and letting it reshape how you see the world, foster empathy, maybe curb biases you didn't even realize you had.
Okay, right. Let's unpack that. Transformation. If that's the goal, what are some key stories from the sources, examples that really show this profound, life-altering shift? Because immersion isn't passive, is it? It demands something from you.
Well, what really stands out is how often the deepest connections seem to happen almost beyond language. When words fail, you're forced to rely on just shared human experience. We saw this really powerful example from South Korea. A traveler thought they understood hospitality, but then they encountered this concept of jong.
Jong. Right, I remember reading about that. It's almost untranslatable, isn't it? Like a deep, unspoken bond, a sense of collective belonging that's more than just friendship.
Exactly. And the story, it takes place during the Chuseok Harvest Festival. This traveler is making songpyeon, those are rice cakes, with a whole multi-generational family. And they're mostly using hand gestures, laughing at mistakes, sharing food around this small table, totally bypassing the language barrier. And the realization was pretty striking. Belonging isn't just about shared words or culture. It's about shared humanity, shared effort. You don't need a perfect sentence to feel seen, to feel connected.
That's powerful. It really shifts the focus, doesn't it? From what you take away, like a photo or a souvenir, to what you receive internally.
Yeah.
That connection. Were there other stories that illustrated this kind of internal shift?
Oh, definitely. The story about spiritual anchoring in Peru, it's just as resonant, I think. So this hiker takes the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu, but not just with a standard guide. They went alongside local Quechua porters, and sitting around the campfire at night, hearing their folklore, not some filtered tourist version, but shared really intimately about how the stars guide their ancestors, how they anchor their world.
And the traveler's big takeaway wasn't just about the mountains being beautiful, but about their own kind of spiritual void back home.
Precisely. That the fast-paced digital life they were living just lacked that fundamental spiritual connection to the physical world, to nature itself. And that wasn't just a thought they had on the trip. It sparked a real lasting interest in indigenous wisdom. It actually inspired them to start a daily meditation practice, a concrete change rooted entirely in that experience. Things like this really show you have to be open to the idea that maybe your normal isn't the only way, or even the best way.
Yeah, that really feels like the core difference. The tourist collects experiences, maybe, but the immersive traveler, they collect these internal conflicts, these questions that actually lead to growth. So, okay, if these are the profound outcomes we're aiming for, how do we make sure we're not just, taking an expensive, superficial trip? What does that blueprint for real immersion actually look like on the ground?
Right. And here's where it gets really practical, really interesting. The reading lays out basically 3 pillars, ways to move you from just observing to actually participating in the daily flow. The first one, pretty much non-negotiable. It's about your accommodation and daily life choices.
Which means, essentially, skipping those insulated, kind of generic Western chain hotels that feel the same everywhere.
Absolutely. Ditch the big hotels. Look for homestays, or at the very least, Airbnbs where the hosts are actually involved, present. The idea is to live within the local economy, the local rhythm. We read that story about the traveler in Hoi An, Vietnam, remember? Didn't just rent a room, they stayed with a family. Learned to cook proper pho from scratch, using herbs right from the garden. Cycled with the host to the market at dawn. Learned how to haggle, the whole experience.
I can just picture that. The energy of the market, the smells. That participation, it feels key. But let me just push back on that slightly. Skipping the familiar security of a hotel for a homestay. It sounds great for someone adventurous, maybe. But did the research talk about the trade-offs, especially for, say, first-time travelers or solo travelers, balancing that authentic feeling with feeling secure?
That's a really important point. And yeah, the sources are clear. Authenticity doesn't mean being reckless. The advice is always about research. Look for hosts with community ratings, good reviews. But often, the security actually comes from integrating. In that Hoi An example, the host became a kind of local guide, an advocate, advising on safe routes, local customs. That's a layer of security. A hotel concierge just can't really match. It definitely requires some vulnerability, sure. But that vulnerability is often what opens the door to the genuine connection.
Okay, fair enough. Embrace the vulnerability.
Yeah.
So we have where we stay, how we engage daily. What's the second pillar the sources highlighted for getting beneath the surface?
The second is work and service. Think programs like WWOF, worldwide opportunities on organic farms, where you trade labor for room and board. Or for a longer commitment, something like the Peace Corps. These are invaluable because they force you into a cooperative setting, working alongside local people on shared goals.
Working side by side, you probably hear the unvarnished truth, right? Not just a curated pitch for tourists.
Exactly. We read about someone on a conservation project in Costa Rica planting native trees in the rainforest, spending hours working in the mud side by side with locals. They heard stories about climate change not as some abstract debate, but as an immediate threat to family livelihoods, to the water supply. That experience, it shifted their understanding from just academic concern to real, passionate eco-advocacy back home. It became emotional, personal.
Right, moving from the head to the heart. So we've got the environment accommodation and the activity work. What's the third key tool? Maybe the most challenging personally.
The third pillar, and yeah, maybe the trickiest, is language immersion. Look, apps like Duolingo are fine, great for building vocabulary, but they're a pretty solitary exercise. The sources really push for immediate real-world application, finding conversation clubs, language exchange partners, that kind of thing. The example from Barcelona was fantastic. This traveler didn't just try ordering coffee in Spanish, they joined a local book club.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and started grappling with authors like Garcia Marquez in Spanish. It forced them to navigate complex ideas, vocabulary, social dynamics all at once. And that experience didn't just boost their fluency, it built real friendships, community connections, confidence.
Those are definitely powerful tools. But we know immersion isn't always, smooth sailing. The sources were careful to mention culture shock, that inevitable phase of frustration, maybe homesickness, or just feeling totally overwhelmed. How do we push through those tough spots without just retreating back to what's comfortable?
Yeah, that's a critical question. How do you manage that difficult transition while still respecting your own needs, your own limits? The main advice seems to be twofold. First, patience, just giving yourself time. And second, constant journaling. Journaling comes up again and again. It seems key because it forces you to actually process those feelings of chaos or frustration instead of just internalizing them or blaming the new environment.
And we have that really vivid anecdote about Delhi, right? The chaos.
We do. The traveler described this complete sensory assault. The nonstop horns, the crowds, the intense smells of spices everywhere, just overwhelming. It was a real moment of fight or flight culture shock. But instead of hiding in the hotel, they deliberately leaned into it, forced themselves onto a packed rickshaw, tried street chat even though they were nervous, joined a local workshop making Diwali lanterns. And by doing that, by engaging with the chaos instead of resisting it, they managed to turn that feeling of shock into something exhilarating, a life-affirming thrill.
That's real resilience forged right there. And besides journaling, what about other ways to stay grounded when things get tough?
Yeah, you definitely need a safety net. Building some kind of support network is important. That could be local expats you connect with, or even reliable online forums. Reddit's Rexpats was mentioned, often has specific, vetted advice. And crucially, the sources recommend finding balance by honoring your roots too. Embrace the new, absolutely, but maybe keep a little comfort kit.
A comfort kit.
Yeah, like a favorite tea from home, a specific blanket, maybe just a playlist that grounds you, something familiar to hold on to during those moments of intense stress or homesickness.
That sounds incredibly practical. Okay, let's pivot slightly. Let's talk about the ethical side of this, that responsibility that comes with deep immersion. The warning about voluntourism seems really critical here.
It is. This is where you have to engage your critical thinking. The message is clear. You must ensure your presence, your help, genuinely benefits the local community, not just your resume or your Instagram feed, and that requires doing your homework, deep research into organizations.
Because we see so many well-meaning efforts that actually end up creating dependency, or worse, taking jobs from local people.
Exactly. The source material really emphasizes vetting organizations thoroughly. For instance, in Thailand, choosing ethical elephant sanctuaries focused on conservation and rescue, rather than places still offering rides or performances. It's about recognizing your impact because you will have an impact and making sure it's positive, avoiding exploitation, whether it's of people or the place itself.
And what about just being a respectful guest in everyday life? The small things.
Basic cultural sensitivity. It sounds simple, but it's the ultimate door opener. It's not about being rigid, but about showing respect through actions. Dressing modestly in religious sites, always asking before taking photos of people, learning even just a few basic greetings. That story from Morocco's Medinas illustrated it perfectly. The traveler made a point of learning to greet vendors with salam alaikum, ensuring their shoulders and knees were covered when wandering around. These small gestures, they immediately signaled respect. And that often led to invitations for tea, genuine conversations, experiences that would be totally inaccessible to someone who just saw the locals as, background scenery.
Small gestures, huge rewards and connection. That makes sense. So looking ahead then, what does all this commitment to true immersion mean for the future of travel? Our sources touched on technology, AI, VR, the idea you might be able to taste virtual paella with haptic suits someday. Will tech eventually replace the need for physical presence?
Well, technology is definitely changing things. We see positive shifts like apps such as Airbnb trying to direct money more to local hosts, bypassing big corporations. And there's a general rise in awareness around eco-friendly, mindful tourism. But that essential human connection, the core of real immersion, I think that endures. You just can't replicate the feeling of Zheng, that deep, unspoken bond we talked about through a screen or a headset. It doesn't work that way.
That really is the core difference, isn't it? Cultural immersion isn't some checklist you tick off. It's a mindset shift. It fosters empathy, it challenges our biases, maybe unconsciously, and ultimately it connects us. It's about being genuinely changed by the world, not just passing through it.
Exactly. It's that messy, essential, emotional feedback loop that you only get from being physically present, which I suppose brings us back to our final question for you, the listener. Considering how fast technology is advancing, these sophisticated virtual experiences, will the ability to, say, virtually walk through Marrakech via haptic suit eventually diminish the need, the profound necessity of actually being there? Or will real-world immersion always hold the unique, exclusive key to experiencing something like Zheng, that deep, unspoken, truly human bond?
Something to chew on, perhaps, during your next journey, whether that's cycling through Vietnam or maybe putting on a VR headset. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into what makes travel truly transformative. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, our focus is on sustained momentum. We're not just looking at those amazing moments of cultural exploration, the big trip, the fascinating documentary. We're figuring out how to bottle that energy.
Right, and turn it into a lifelong habit.
Exactly. For you, the learner who wants to move beyond just kind of surface level stuff and become truly well-informed, this deep dive is your guide. How do you keep that global mindset going, even when you're just, stuck in your Monday morning commute?
That really is the mission, isn't it? We have these incredibly insightful experiences, maybe travel, maybe just something we read or watched.
Yeah.
But if we don't integrate them, they just fade. They become nice memories, maybe.
Right.
So the central question is, how do we transition? How do we go from being an occasional visitor or just a passive consumer of international content into being an everyday global citizen?
An everyday global citizen. I like that framing.
How do we make sure the knowledge we gain keeps actively enriching our daily lives, actually changes how we see the world?
Okay, so I think the most important thing we pulled from the sources here is that longevity. It requires structure, not just spontaneity.
Spot on. It's easy to feel pumped right after a trip, but the key is integrating small, sustainable habits, things that don't rely on huge time commitments.
We have to keep that spark alive somehow.
Absolutely. And the first step is what the research calls the culture ritual, basically building structure right into your weekly schedule.
Okay, the culture ritual. Tell me more. How small are we talking? Can we start really small?
It absolutely needs to be sustainable. So the sources suggest dedicating just 1 hour a week. That's it.
An hour? That seems doable.
Yeah, just 1 hour to something completely new and immersive. Think of it like a low-effort, high-reward transportation system for your mind.
Okay, like what? Give us a really sensory example.
All right, picture this. You commit to cooking a challenging dish, something from a country you've never been to. Let's say Ethiopian injera bread with a spicy miserwat, that lentil stew. And while the stew simmers, which, takes a bit of time, you put on some Amharic jazz. You aren't just following a recipe. You're maybe reading up a little on the history of the cuisine, understanding why sharing food from one big plate is so central to community there.
So you're getting context.
Exactly. You're visualizing the bustle and color of the markets in Addis Ababa. It's a full cultural immersion right there in your kitchen.
I love that. Because you're engaging all your senses and it's tactile, becomes a real memory, not just like a factoid you read.
Precisely.
But the sources also suggest pairing that kind of tactile ritual with something more intellectual, the world news dive.
Right. The culture ritual feeds your soul, maybe, and the world news dive feeds your critical thinking. It's a quick focus routine, say 20 minutes a week.
Okay.
Where you specifically seek out local news sources from a chosen region. And importantly, not just the usual big mainstream international reports.
Why is that distinction so important? Why specifically local over the global news feed?
Well, because local outlets give you texture, context. They talk about things that actually matter day to the people living there, not just the big events that make international headlines.
I see.
So, for example, one deep dive mentioned in the sources looked into Southeast Asia, specifically reading Vietnamese publications. The focus wasn't politics, it was tracking the fascinating evolution of their coffee culture.
Coffee culture, interesting.
Yeah, how it shifted from being, a legacy of French colonial influence to becoming this source of fierce modern national pride. It resulted in these hyper-specific kind of hipster cafes in Hanoi.
Okay, and here's where this small habit can turn into a real-world connection, right? That coffee research didn't just sit there.
No, it sparked action. Actually ordering Robusta beans, figuring out how to brew coffee Fin style, that slow drip method.
All right.
And that in turn led to sharing photos, maybe tagging friends online, saying, hey, want to try this with me? And suddenly, boom, you've got a little virtual global coffee club.
That's the ripple effect we're talking about.
Exactly. That simple act of sharing what you learn turns solitary curiosity into connection. Almost immediately.
And connection, well, that's the natural bridge to our next major theme, isn't it? Building bridges right in your own backyard.
Yes.
Yeah.
You don't need a passport to be international.
So we move from our solo weekly habits, things we do on our own, to more intentional local engagement. The sources strongly advocate for seeking out people and community events. How do we do that without feeling, awkward or intrusive?
Well, start with shared experience. And nothing shares better than food, right? Always food. So the strategy is seeking out local international groups. Often these are based around communal potlucks where people share heritage dishes. We're talking things like Nigeria's jollof rice or maybe Peruvian ceviche.
Okay, potlucks. But the real power isn't just in the taste, is it? It's got to be the story behind the dish.
Exactly right. The source material shares this profoundly moving anecdote. It was about a woman who brought her grandmother's recipe to one of these gatherings. Yeah. And that recipe had traveled across continents. It had survived the family's migration during a time of great wartime conflict.
Wow.
So when you understand that history, when you realize that the food on the plate carries memory and trauma and identity, it's not just a meal anymore. It truly becomes, as the source put it, empathy on a plate.
Empathy on a plate. That's your aha moment right there.
Yeah.
That really shifts the whole perception of what a potluck can be.
It does.
Okay, another great strategy mentioned involves language exchange and shared hobbies. Joining a language tandem group seems pretty low stakes. Anyone could probably try that.
It really is. And the sources give us a fantastic example.
Okay.
Imagine meeting a Brazilian who's learning English, and in return, you're, fumbling through Portuguese with them.
Yeah, lots of fumbling, I bet.
For sure. Maybe you meet at a park, swap phrases, end up having this loud, hilarious debate about soccer rivalries over, maybe some caipirinhas. The laughter is the glue. It's not about achieving fluency overnight. It's about accepting that vulnerability, making that instant human connection across cultures.
And once you start building that curiosity muscle, it seems like it extends pretty easily to family and friends, too. For listeners with kids, the sources recommend doing passport nights.
Oh, yeah. That's a brilliant way to make geography and history fun, not like homework. You create a simple homemade passport. Yeah. You pick a country, say Morocco, and the family travels there for evening. You make a tagine together, maybe listen to some Nawa music, craft simple lanterns, talk about the culture.
And they get a stamp.
They get a passport stamp for the night. Keeps it engaging.
Love it. And for adults, turning date nights into global game nights. That sounds fun.
Yeah, think beyond Monopoly or Scrabble. Try games like Mancala from Africa or Go from Japan. Plus, we have amazing tech tools now, right, that make the world so accessible. The sources mentioned using virtual reality tours to literally walk the streets of Tokyo or explore Machu Picchu together right from the sofa.
Those accessibility tools are key. Because sustaining curiosity, it doesn't just make you a better traveler. The sources argue it builds profound personal resilience.
Absolutely. It helps mitigate challenges like reverse culture shock.
Yes. That specific psychological funk you can get into when you return home after being abroad for a while. Suddenly, everything familiar feels kind of dull or disconnected or just strange.
Yeah. If you've ever felt that blandness after a really intense, stimulating time overseas, you know exactly what we mean.
So instead of letting that dullness take over, the wisdom here is to channel that energy, turn it into action.
That's strategy 1, document and channel. The sources told this story of someone returning home after living in Korea. They felt completely flat, disconnected.
Okay.
But instead of retreating, they started a blog. sharing detailed K-drama recommendations, but pairing them with cultural breakdowns, explaining social norms, historical context, that sort of thing.
Clever.
It channeled the passion, kept the engagement high, and turned that isolating feeling of return into a shared, connecting experience for others, too.
Okay, that makes sense. And strategy 2 is setting measurable cultural challenges. This sounds like something for those times when maybe you can't get out and actively volunteer or travel.
Yes, exactly. We should encourage ourselves, maybe set monthly reading or viewing goals focused outside our usual cultural bubble.
Like specific books.
For instance, reading Pachinko by Min Jin Lee gives you crucial context on Korean-Japanese history, or grabbing The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho for a dose of Brazilian magic realism, or maybe tackling Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie for a complex view of Indian independence. The challenge is simple. Read one book by a foreign author monthly, or watch one subtitled film weekly, something achievable.
These challenges keep your intellectual muscles flexing. Okay, but now let's move to what the sources identified as the deepest layer, and frankly, the most profound takeaway for me. Using all this cultural learning for social good. Curiosity as activism.
This is really where the knowledge you've gained stops being purely about self-growth, important as that is, and starts contributing to the wider world. We need to explore the why here, too.
Right.
Cultures are living, breathing entities. And sometimes, let's be honest, they are under threat. Our curiosity, our engagement, it can become a force for preservation and unity.
Okay, let's look at the action examples then. Starting globally, what are some simple ways listeners can turn knowledge into tangible support?
Globally, the sources stress things like supporting organizations focused on cultural preservation, think UNESCO, for example, or making conscious consumer choices.
Like fair trade.
Exactly. Supporting fair trade products sourced from regions you've learned about. So when you buy that coffee you researched earlier, you know exactly why you're paying a bit more for it. It connects back.
And locally, which arguably is where the most impactful activism can often happen, right?
I think so. It's about building those bridges we talked about earlier, but more actively. Volunteer with refugee programs. That's direct, necessary integration work.
How might that look?
Well, it could involve learning just basic greetings in Arabic while helping a recently arrived Syrian family navigate their new neighborhood. Sharing your time, your local knowledge, listening to their stories. That becomes an act of profound cultural exchange and support.
Or even just volunteering at city events, not just attending, but actively helping out.
Yes, like assisting with those complex Rangoli designs at a local Diwali celebration, maybe helping serve traditional sweets, tasting samosas. You're stepping off the sidelines and becoming part of the community fabric.
You're participating, not just observing.
Exactly. And the ultimate why behind all of this, the rituals, the potlucks, the volunteering, is that these acts of learning and connection are probably the most potent tools we have to combat division and xenophobia and just plain misunderstanding.
Yeah.
When you know someone's grandmother's story, like in that potluck example, it's much harder to generalize or dismiss their entire culture.
That sentiment that local acts combat division feels like the perfect place to maybe address some practical roadblocks. We drew specific examples from learners just like you, compiling some fantastic listener Q&As based on the source material.
Great idea. First up, Q1 comes from Sarah in Canada. She asks about overcoming solo travel fear, especially in unfamiliar cultures.
Oh yeah, this is such a common hurdle. The advice is pretty straightforward. Start small.
Right. Don't book a 2-week jungle trek right off the bat.
Exactly. Start with maybe just a day trip to the most diverse neighborhood near you. Get used to navigating unfamiliar signs, hearing different languages, just feeling slightly out of your element, but safely.
Makes sense.
Also, research safety apps like BeSafe was mentioned. And maybe join women-only travel groups online for peer support and tips.
And the sources shared a great example of a first solo trip to Thailand. The person deliberately stayed in hostels known for their communal dinners.
Ah, smart. Built-in community.
Totally. It instantly removes that isolation barrier. You walk in and bam, you immediately meet potential friends from Sweden or Australia or wherever. You build confidence gradually. It turns the fear into tangible freedom.
Okay, next question. Miguel from Spain wonders, what's the best way to learn local slang without sounding awkward or inappropriate?
Huh. Yes, the slang trap. It's so relatable. You definitely can't just memorize phrases off a list, can you?
No, that never works.
The key seems to be immersion via media. Dive into local podcasts, watch YouTube vlogs from that place, or use apps like Hello Talk for Real, low-stakes chats with native speakers.
Okay.
And here's the pro tip that really makes the difference. Practice with natives, and this is crucial. Laugh at your slip-ups.
Oh, you have to be willing to laugh at yourself.
Absolutely. Remember the example of picking up the local phrase oral in Mexico? It wasn't learned from a book. It was picked up by constantly eavesdropping, basically, at markets. And then trying it out, probably incorrectly at first until it landed. People generally appreciate the effort. Slip-ups aren't embarrassing mistakes. They're bonding moments, usually.
That's a great perspective. Okay, and finally, Aisha from the UAE asks, how can I share my culture authentically with my friends and colleagues without it feeling like a forced lecture?
Yeah, avoiding the lecture trap. Authenticity is everything here.
So how do you do it?
You have to avoid turning cultural sharing into some kind of formal presentation. Instead, host casual events. Maybe an impromptu henna night or an Emirati coffee tasting where you serve dates and just naturally talk about the tradition of hospitality it represents. Keep it relaxed. And when you share, always share the story behind the item, naturally. Don't lecture on the entire history of Korea. Bring kimchi to a potluck and maybe explain its deep fermentation process, tying it naturally to the specific Korean seasons and family traditions of preservation.
People connect with stories.
Exactly. People are inherently fascinated by the context, the personal narrative. They're not usually looking for a textbook history lesson in that moment.
These practical strategies, combined with those core habits we talked about, really demonstrate that cultural exploration isn't some destination you finally arrive at.
No, it's definitely a lifelong journey. Cumulative.
Yeah, and one that fundamentally makes you kinder, wiser, more aware of the world and the people around you. To sustain this wisdom, it seems we just have to commit to constant, intentional connection.
Indeed. We must keep questioning, keep connecting, and remember that our deepest learning often occurs not through grand gestures, but through that quiet, dedicated repetition, the small habits.
So what does this all boil down to for you, the listener, right now? We've kind of established that the most profound cultural learning often happens really close to home when we connect with neighbors, when we volunteer locally, and that cultures are living, breathing narratives, sometimes under threat. With that in mind, here's the final thought. What immediate local act of connection, could be signing up for that language exchange, joining that potluck group, finding a volunteer shift, what act will you commit to this week to help sustain the next story in your own community?
Think about that one act. That's your starting line.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.